Retro Quickies. Air Fortress.
I think everyone has at least one game that you kind of remember from your childhood, one that you remember playing or seeing, but don't remember the name, and were never able to really find much information about it whenever the memory happened to surface. Air Fortress was that game for me. I remember vividly being over at a friend's house, and she and her family had a massive collection of NES games that I had never seen or heard of before. In between games of the safer picks, like Super Mario Bros. 3, we'd dip into that library, and one of those games was about flying across the surface of a space station before dismounting and using a jetpack to navigate through the station's internals to destroy its core and then escape before it blew up. It was really cool, but after I left my friend's house that night, I forgot about it and was never able to find it again until recently. So, is it as fun and fascinating as it was for me that night? Well, in a nice twist on the typical outcome of rediscovering a piece of media from your childhood, yes, this game is actually still pretty fun. The game was released in 1987 and was both developed and published by HAL Laboratories of all companies. This was a good 5 years before Kirby would be made, but I feel like a lot of folks forget that HAL Labs had a pretty good track record for putting out fun, arcade-style games before the little pink puffball came along, mostly by assisting others in getting their games out on the NES. They were responsible for helping Nintendo complete several black box games, including Pinball, Balloon Fight, and Mach Rider. They helped to port several Williams arcade classics to the NES, including Joust, Defender, and Defender 2, and would release several original titles of their own, including the SNES games Arcana and Hyperzone, and of course the Eggerland series, which would eventually make its way to America as The Adventures of Lolo. All this before Kirby made his debut. Not bad at all, and that's not covering nearly all the other games they did in the interim, like Air Fortress. I do have to say this game doesn't have a lot of in-game lore, but it's another example of a game having a story that goes way harder than it has to. You play as HAL Bailman, a native of the planet Farmel, who, through recent advancements in space travel, have discovered that their planet is being set upon by a series of floating air fortresses, trademark, that harvest a planet of all its natural resources and then leave it an uninhabitable husk when they're done. An initial assault fails to even make a dent into any of them, and as such they send HAL in as a stealth mission in one final desperate attempt to save their planet. As HAL, you have to land on each of the individual fortresses, fight your way through their internal defenses, destroy their cores, and then escape with your life. That sounds friggin' awesome, and the game actually manages to do a pretty good job in delivering on that premise. You have to get through 8 fortresses, each one getting bigger and more complex than the last, and each one is broken into 3 different phases. First off is the approach that starts off each stage. These play out like typical scrolling space shooters, where you just have to survive to the end while shooting down any enemies that get in your way. However, beyond survival, the even more important goal of these sections is to pick up as many bomb and energy capsules as you can, as these will increase the resources you have available to you for the rest of the level. When you reach the end of the track, the second part of the level starts, the actual infiltration, and this is where the game starts to get a little bit more unique. Your job is to fight your way through the fortress's forces, find the core, and blow it up. You don't have to worry about any sort of time limit, you just have to destroy the core before you end up dying. And that's where the energy you collected during the approach comes in. This is your health meter, but it's also your jetpack's fuel. See, you don't have a traditional jump mechanic in this game. Instead, you ascend by pressing up on the D-pad to float into the air using your jetpack. Doing this will slowly drain your energy, but when you aren't floating, your energy will slowly tick back up to its maximum. However, when you get hit by an enemy's attack, it will not only reduce your energy, but also your maximum energy as well, meaning that you're not only moving closer to death, but you also have less energy to keep yourself in the air, and given how these fortresses are laid out, having less energy to move is incredibly dangerous, and given how quickly some enemies can shred through your health, even if you have close to like 1500 energy when you start a fortress, there's a good chance you'll be leaving it with less than 400. Beyond the enemies, the game also slowly introduces a lot of obstacles that you have to navigate around, like crushing screws, magnets that will draw you towards dangerous areas, spiked walls that damage you on contact, and so on and so forth. In order to fight back, beyond your jetpack, you have two main methods of attacking. There's your regular attack, launched by using the A button, which is a simple laser blast that comes out at a decent clip but is fairly weak. And then there's your bombs. You have a limited supply of these, but they are super powerful and take down most basic enemies in a single shot, and more powerful obstacles in only 2 or 3. However, you typically have a very limited amount of them, and you can't count on getting refills during the infiltration itself. Yes, bombs and energy capsules can drop randomly from enemies inside the fortress, but this is a very rare occurrence, and you can't count on that saving you when you're desperate for a refill. This is especially bad if you happen to have no bombs when you come across the core, or even these mini-cores, as they have massive health pools, fight back with homing shots, and oftentimes will be defended by tough enemies or obstacles. It takes forever to take these things down with your regular attacks. Oh, another interesting aspect to your attack is the fact that both bombs and regular blasts will cause you to fly backwards a little bit, so you have to account for that when you're firing rapidly. It isn't really that useful for movements or dodging, as most enemies will attack from in front of you, and you have to attack from in front of them, and so the only way you'll be dodging most attacks is either by floating up or drifting down, so being pushed back every time you fire off an attack is more of an annoyance than anything. Once you've destroyed the core though, you still have to deal with the third phase of every stage, which is the escape sequence. In addition to finding the core, you can also come across an escape shaft, where your ship will be waiting for you. Before the core is destroyed, you can't actually access it, but once you return there after the core is destroyed, you hop on and dash out of the fortress as it explodes. However, if you don't find the escape shaft in time, the fortress will explode with you in it, necessitating you start the stage over from the very beginning. I rather like this, as it makes the ending of every stage feel incredibly tense. At first, the power just goes out, but the longer you take to escape, the more violently the fortress starts to shake, with a rumbling that grows louder and louder as it gets closer and closer to exploding. Now, most enemies in the fortress stay dead after you've defeated them, which is good because later fortresses get more and more labyrinthine as you go, so you'll be doing a lot of backtracking and circling around on yourself. There are exceptions to this, mostly with the more annoying or powerful enemies like these jetpack troopers who will respawn after a certain amount of time has passed. But for the most part, if you clear the way to the exit before destroying the core, well, that's just left stuff for you to worry about while trying to get out. That is, of course, if you can find your way to the exit to begin with. The first couple of fortresses are fairly straightforward. Level 1 is literally a straight shot from beginning to end, and Level 2 only has a split near the end, with one path taking you to the core and the other taking you to the escape shaft. But after that, the layouts of the fortress become increasingly maze-like, to the point where memorizing the layout becomes essential to surviving, especially during the escape sequences. This does work against the game though, as all of the dead ends that you come across start to wear you down as you realize that exploring isn't really a necessary part of the game. The only reason to explore is to find the exit and the core, and anytime you aren't doing either of those, you're wasting your limited resources. There aren't any upgrades or anything like that in the game, so going out of your way to fully explore a fortress is not a good idea if you already know where both of your end goals are. These more winding levels, coupled with the stress of the escape sequences, does also reveal another one of the game's weaknesses, and that's your movement speed. You can't move very fast in this game, and your speed doesn't really increase that much when you're in the air. When you're first going through an area of a fortress, that's not that big a deal, since the methodical pace you take is perfect for allowing you to carefully approach threats, line up a shot, and take them out while keeping your distance. But once you have to rush through an area to reach the exit as fast as possible, or have to keep backtracking through places you've already cleared out of most major threats, you start to realize just how slow HAL moves. And you can see that slow movement speed because the game is actually very good about its color choice. Character and enemy designs in this game are fairly simple, with the sprites being small and the environments made out of mostly colored squares. Heck, your character doesn't even really have a face, as you're in this orange astronaut suit for the entire game. But the bright orange suit is actually a strength of the game, as the color choice for the background is almost always an excellent contrast for HAL, and even when the lights are out and the power is off, the vibrant orange continues to glow. Most of the enemies, possessing a light gray or dark red color scheme, clash beautifully with the background, so you don't ever have to worry about being taken by surprise by anything the fortress throws at you. So whenever you get killed, it does feel more like it's your own fault. Either not finding the exit fast enough, trying to bum rush through a difficult area, or just getting unlucky against a rather tough enemy. The game's continue system is both generous and yet still a little punishing. If you die at any point in the level, you can continue from the level that you last reached, so die on Fortress 3, you can restart on the third fortress. You have unlimited continues, and receive a password every time you beat a fortress so that you can stop playing and come back to where you were. But no matter what happens, you are always starting from the very beginning of the fortress. And I do mean the very beginning, going all the way back to the approach phase. The good news is that these fortresses aren't randomly generated, so you are capable of memorizing the route through each fortress, or managing to brute force your way through after multiple run-throughs. And of course, the fact that you don't have to worry about a permanent game over means that reaching the end is only a matter of perseverance, and how big of a tolerance you have for winding mazes that continually fill with more and more dangerous traps and robots. The game is fun and enjoyable. I like its unusual control scheme, its aesthetic is simple but enjoyable, and while the story doesn't really enter into the game itself while you're playing it, the backstory is amazingly entertaining. I'm glad that this one stuck in my head the way that it did for so long, and I'm glad I was able to find and enjoy it again. I give this one a recommendation. Just go in knowing that some of the later levels are definitely going to test your patience the first time through.